Look, both of us and every single person who is listening to this show is going to be a patient. They're either current patients, future patients, or past patients. No one is going to escape being affected by some form of a problem. And I'm not trying to put a pessimistic thing, I'm just being very realist. That's the reality. Cancer, however, is a bit different. The minute you hear that C word, you really feel almost as if your entire ground is shaking. And it doesn't just affect you. You start thinking, where did I get this? Kids affected, family affected. How? I mean, every single thing. It has an impact on the patient and the loved ones more than any other disease. You asked about what inspired writing the book. If you think we have a lot of information out there, we live in an era where we are literally drowning in information. You can go to any search engine and ask any question, and you get articles and blogs and websites and all of this. I continuously felt that patients and families are still confused about basic facts. Now, why is that? Because the more you have information about things, you could actually have signal and noise and you cannot separate them. So I thought to myself, why not write a book that is very easy to understand for everyone? And the best way to write something that reaches more people is by telling stories and by using plain and simple language. We react as humans to stories much better than lecturing and preaching and textbooking. So I wanted to bring the art of storytelling with plain and simple language, combine both, and come up with something that everybody can read. So whenever you read it, you're going to imagine yourself a character in the story and you can really relate to it.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast for patients.
This is Genetics for Healthcare, a podcast dedicated to patients and their caregivers to help them advocate for a precision medicine approach to treatment, disease screening, and prevention. You can find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, LinkedIn. While you're there, hit that subscribe button, follow us to get alerts on great new podcasts like this one. Today, I am honored to have Dr. Chadi Nabhan, who is a hematologist by training. He is the author of two books that I know of. I'm not sure, Dr. Nabhan, if you got another one out there, but the two books we want to
I'm
get
working on
into,
it, working on it.
I know he is. He is a prolific podcaster, someone that I've followed for quite a while. His current podcast, Healthcare Unfiltered, is something you got to check out. And obviously, he's a business executive helping bring innovation to patients. And we'll talk to him more about that. Dr. Nabhan, thank you for being a guest on Genetics for Healthcare.
Well, it's honor to be with you, but you just have to drop this doctor thing. So it's like
Okay.
we're on first name basis, no doctors here. We're all trying to do the same thing. I really appreciate the invite. Looking forward to our conversation.
Pleasure's all mine. I will say I learned from your website that in your bio that you say you came to the United States as an immigrant to practice medicine. Can you tell us about your background? What led you to choosing a career in medicine and why specifically cancer care, oncology?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of things in life, honestly, happen in serendipity. Not everything not everything you plan for occurs. I was born in Syria. That's my home country, and in fact, growing up, I always wanted to be a journalist. I thought I'm going to write like this article in the newspaper, and the political landscape will shake because I wrote something. But I did pretty well in school, in high school, and the system there in Syria, where I was born, you can, if you do pretty well in high school, you can apply to medical school. So I did, and I got in, and and I liked what I was doing. I felt there's so much human interaction when it comes to talking to patients. It's not just the science. The science is one thing, but the human connection is par to none when it comes to medicine. Um, because think about it, whenever you seek medical help, you are in the most vulnerable state of your life.
Absolutely.
Um, Health is the most precious thing that we have, and the fact that people who I've never met were willing to um, trust me in making decisions, made a whole lot of made me just feel really humbled and kept me grounded. I came to the United States in the early 90s, um, over 32, 34 years ago now. And um, cancer was not the initial thing I wanted to do, actually. It happened. I'll tell you a story, and I think I'm a storyteller. I was doing my internship in residency at Loyola University here in Chicago area, and it was about the third month of internship, and I was on the oncology unit, and I was like a deer in headlights. I didn't know what's going on. I mean, you're just like 3 months into residency, you're just trying to make sure you're doing the right thing. It's very nerve wracking. And I walked into this room. It was a lady in her late 40s, and she had ovarian cancer that has gone elsewhere in her body. So it wasn't really a curable condition. And her two daughters were sitting on the couch in the room. This was in October 1995. And 30 years later, I still remember literally her face. I remember actually the fact that she had a head scarf to cover
Mm.
her baldness because she had chemotherapy and she lost her hair. And I walk in and I was just trying to write the vital signs that were on a clipboard attached to her bed. Um, and she asked me, she smiled, and we said good morning to each other. And one of the questions she asked me, she said, "Do you think I'll live until Christmas?" It was October, and I was really taken aback by the question because, number one, I I didn't think I was actually qualified to answer such question. I barely knew much about the disease, and I was just trying to make sure I'm preparing for the medical rounds, the morning rounds with the attending. And I also such a deep question. I never thought I would be asked. I didn't know how to handle a question like this when you're asked by somebody else, essentially asking me about their mortality. So I really got nervous, and she kind of noticed that. She could tell that I was a bit uncomfortable when she asked that question, and she smiled, and she looked at me and she said, "Doc, don't worry about this. It's okay. You don't have to give me an answer. Just promise me you'll come back tomorrow morning and smile." And I walked out of the room just completely confused. And I was really shaken by this because I felt I should have answered something. And it was such a deep question. But, but what that encounter told me that despite the fact that she's the one who was getting the chemotherapy, she's the one who was not doing well, she was the one in the hospital, she actually felt bad that she made me nervous and uncomfortable. She said, "Hey, don't worry about it. It's okay." She was calming me down.
Wow.
And she also just come back and smile because that's really the human connection between two people who are strangers and one is vulnerable. I never forgot this. I wrote about this in one of my books. I never forgot this encounter. I always think of her as like the angel that, and I felt I have to take care of these people. I have
Mm.
to be. So it wasn't honestly the science. I'm telling you, it was not the science. It was not a family member that was affected by cancer. I wanted to save life. No, it was the human interaction, the human connection that you forge with patients with cancer that I don't believe it exists with any other type of patients. And that's what drew me to it. I'm going to have a career in oncology and in cancer. And then, of course, down the road, the science, the molecular stuff, the precision medicine, which I know you're very passionate about, and other things. But the first thing that let me do cancer was that encounter and the patient relationships that you can have.
I think it's a very powerful story because my father is a now 20-year colon cancer survivor. When a patient gets a diagnosis of cancer, the entire family just got a diagnosis, right? It affects the individual and those closest to them. And I want to get into your book. It's called The Cancer Journey, understanding diagnosis, treatment, recovery, and prevention. And the voice, it seems like you're recalling this from 40 years. Okay, won't put a number on it. The 90s, about your first interaction, one of your first interactions with cancer patient into your training, and that same level of humility as an individual, and the level of gratitude for the work you do hasn't left you. And it's not like I'm calling this out. Like, we can get jaded when you do something for a long time and you just it come familiar. But it is that gratitude and humility that connects you to the human condition and connects you to a person's heart. Tell us about the book and what really inspired you to write the stories from your experience treating cancer.
I'll have to tell you just a couple of things. We all have encounters that you never forget, you know? Like there are the people who hurt you. You're never going to forget that. You forgive them sometimes, but you're not going to forget. And the people who actually made an impact on your life positively. It's amazing how the human emotions work, isn't it? Like
Absolutely.
the people who really make a huge difference for you positively and negatively, this complete contrast, these are the folks that you will never ever forget. But I have, look, both of us and every single person who is listening to this show is going to be a patient. They're either current patients, future patients, or past patients. No one, no one is going to escape being affected by some form of a problem. It may not be cancer, it could be heart disease, lung disease, whatever it is. And I'm not trying to put a pessimistic thing, I'm just being very realist. That's the reality.
Yes.
So, cancer, however, from all the diseases, like you just mentioned earlier, is a bit different because number one, the minute you hear that C word, you really feel almost as if your entire ground is shaking. Your entire life now is trembling, and it doesn't just affect you. You start thinking, where did I get this? Kids affected, family affected. How? I mean, every single thing. It has an impact on the patient and the loved ones more than any other disease. And I'm not downplaying the other diseases out there. I mean, heart attacks and strokes and other things are bad. Of course, they're bad. But there is something about cancer that shakes people differently. And you asked about what inspired writing the book. If you think we have a lot of information out there, we live in an era where we are literally drowning in information. You can go to any search engine and ask any question, and you get articles and blogs and websites and all of this. So we're not short on information. But here's the interesting part and what inspired the book. Despite the information that we have, I continuously felt that patients and families are still confused about basic facts.
Mm,
The information are there, but they are confused about basic facts. Now, why is that? Because the more you have information about things, you could actually have um, signal and noise, and you cannot separate them. Anybody could put anything out there. So it becomes actually very difficult for folks to understand all the information that is out there. So there's so much signal and noise, and we need to separate them. So I thought to myself, why not write a book that is very easy to understand for everyone? And the best way to write something that reaches more people is by telling stories, being a storyteller and sharing stories, and by using plain and simple language. We react as humans to stories much better than lecturing and preaching and textbooking. Because if I tell you a story, I mean, I just told you a story about why I went into cancer care, about the woman I met in 1995, October 1995. I promise you, you're going to remember that story because I just shared a story with you about human interaction and we relate to that. But if I had given you like a big lecture about the importance of science and cancer care, what I got into it, you will forget that in about 2, 3 days. maybe less. So I wanted to bring the art of storytelling with plain and simple language, combine both, and come up with something that everybody can read. And these are all true stories. Every story in the book was a true story of a patient or a family member or a neighbor or a friend that I have taken care of. So whenever you read it, you're going to imagine yourself a character in the story and you can really relate to it. Through these stories, I bring the scientific points and the information. So if I talk about staging cancer, I tell you several stories that I actually went through and that shaped how I started thinking about simplifying the staging for cancer and so on. And lastly, I wanted to use the continuous journey of what happens from diagnosis until hopefully cure. So I put myself in the patient's shoes and I went step by step what happens usually, and hopefully this will become a simple guide for anyone who wants to read it. Doesn't have to be patients. This could be family member, a nurse, a student, a pharmacist, a doctor, anyone who is interested in understanding the cancer journey in a very simple way will see something that will draw them into the book.
Absolutely. I don't know if there is a chapter around genetics, but obviously the growth of genetic and genomic information and its implications in how we treat cancer and how cancer is being studied is it seems to be growing faster than our ability to implement it right into the healthcare system. And I know this is kind of a loaded question. In fact, we could talk all this podcast about this,
Of
but
course.
but when you think about like the emerging genetic insights and kind of how this is improving our diagnosis, improving treatment, even recovery and prevention of cancer, like what stands out to you that is actionable now that some of the patients who or their family members who are looking might be interested in?
Yeah, I mean, genetics in cancer is really the name of the game, and I do talk about this. So the last chapter in the book called "The Future of Cancer Care,"
Mm,
and I talk about various aspects where I think the future of cancer care will be a bit different, including the use of genomics and genetics when it comes to diagnosing cancer and treating cancer. Also, throughout the book, when I talk about immunotherapy, targeted therapy, and things like that, it's hard to do that without alluding to the genomics and cancer. And pretty much what's happening right now today, the ability to understand cancer on the molecular level has transformed how we actually target and treat cancer and how we really even think of cancer. Because now we have the capabilities of understanding the disease on a very deep level. Let me simplify it. I think your listeners will know I like to simplify things. It's almost you're looking at a building and you know it's a building. So think of the cancer as a building. That's all what we knew about the cancer. It's a building, and we just need to actually destroy that building. So we just throw rocks at it, and these rocks are various types of chemotherapies and so on. Well, today we know the details of inside the building. We know the rooms of the building. We know the detail of every room. We know the how it's decorated. We know what's happening, the colors of the walls. We know the floors. So you have the details of what's happening inside. And you also know how you erected that building and how you built it. So you have the ability, you start understanding the dynamics that led that building to be what it is. So instead of just throwing rocks at it, and because when you throw rocks at a building and the building destroys, you actually have a lot of damage to the surrounding people, right? You have a lot of collateral damage because everything's going to be destroyed. Well, now you actually become more methodical into how you attack that building. So, well, I'm just go in. The problem in this building is not the whole building. Maybe there's like this one room that is really to take care of it, and so on. So that's how I view genomes and cancer. Right now, we have the technology of actually sequencing tumors and understanding the DNA architecture, the RNA architecture, the protein architecture of these tumors. And once you actually know that, you can, number one, develop drugs that target these. Number two, if you already have drugs that can target these, you can use these drugs. Why use the rocks if you can use a very more targeted treatment that doesn't cause a lot of damage to healthy people and healthy tissue? So that's, and I think that's the present and the future. Frankly, it's about knowing more targets and then being smart in designing treatments against these targets. That's what it is. Because sometimes you find these targets and there are no treatments for them. So it's good to find them, but if there's no treatment for it, then you have to research and try to develop a particular drug that goes against that target if you keep seeing it.
Yeah, I love that analogy. You paint the picture. I love this the story of the building. I love that. But knowing the molecular cause structure, the pathways that activate or can deactivate, disease processes is major to like you said, take that building down without destroying the entire structure. That's
Right.
awesome. I want to switch gears really quick. As you can tell, Chadi is a master storyteller, and toxic exposure. I don't. This is your
It was
book.
my first book, yeah.
Okay, it's your first book. Now, this is something. It kind of reads like a movie. To be honest with you, I
Yeah,
don't know
hopefully
if that's your intention.
there's a producer listening to this. Let's see.
The title of the book is Toxic Exposure: The True Story Behind the Monsanto Trials and the Search for Justice. I mean, you can look this up. This is public information. Johnson versus Monsanto. This is the first person to
Yep.
take the maker of Roundup weed killer herbicide to court and won a substantial judgment. Um, I just thought this was just like fascinating. Can you share your experience of you being an expert witness in this case and why you decided to write this book?
Oh, where do I start? There's a lot of things that happen. I mean, so number one, I never did expert witness work before the Roundup trials. It's not something that I have done. It wasn't something I had the bandwidth to do, or I really had the desire to do. But something was different about this because when I first was contacted by couple of law firms to look at this and I started researching it, I noticed how um, widely used this pesticide is, this herbicide Roundup is. I didn't realize it was like the most common used herbicide in the entire world. I didn't realize it goes on. You just basically, spray it on the crops, and you get able to harvest, which means it's our food as well because you just get the wheat and the bread and the cereal. And then I started researching it even more, and I realized there are some studies that showed how the chemical ingredient of this Roundup is causing DNA damage, could actually break the cell. And there's an organization called the IARC, the International Association of Research on Cancer, that has labeled glyphosate, which is the chemical in Roundup, as a probably carcinogenic. So all of this together made me actually intrigued because I've been an expert clinically and research wise in lymphoma. And I thought to myself, maybe there's a link here that I need to explore further. So I agreed to look at cases and look at each case individually. And I reviewed the literature on glyphosate, I reviewed the literature on Roundup. And I was convinced number one, Roundup is awful, glyphosate is terrible, despite the fact that the EPA tells you, oh, it doesn't cause anything. Well, the EPA doesn't get everything right. And we also know that there are certain, I mean, just because the EPA says something, it doesn't mean it's always accurate. We have to have some our independent thinking that's based on research, publications, and science. And I disagree with the EPA on this. I don't believe the EPA is correct by saying that glyphosate does not cause cancer. Now, I'm not suggesting that glyphosate or Roundup cause all cancers. I'm not suggesting they cause all lymphomas, but I think in some patients, in some situations, glyphosate and Roundup do cause the disease. So I got involved in this, and I was an expert witness defending Lee Johnson, who was the first patient that sued Monsanto. He is a groundskeeper in California, in San Francisco, and nice guy. I met him actually in person before the trial. I think it's October 2017 when I met him, and I reviewed his case and I reviewed everything that was going on. It was actually very clear in my mind, at least, that the Roundup that he was actually the glyphosate he was spraying is the cause of the rare lymphoma that he actually developed. So I agreed to testify on his behalf, and in the subsequent two trials that also we won. My experience is very broad. To answer the second half of your question, and I detailed that all in the book. But I would say maybe a couple of things I came to learn that the legal system in the United States is very interesting when it comes to things like that. It's like, for example, um, there's a lot of effort and strategy between both sides, the one who is suing and the one who is being sued, in deciding what evidence should be presented and shared with the jury. And they negotiate all of this with the judge, and the judge has to say, we can admit this into evidence or we cannot admit this into evidence. And I was thinking, well, why not just show everything? Like, if I'm the juror and you're asking me to make a decision, show me everything. Don't hide anything. Don't, I mean, I wrote this in the book. I'm like, I was really surprised how much effort is being done into what can be admitted into evidence versus not, but there's a lot of strategy behind that. The other thing that's actually very interesting is that um, when it comes to settlements, because as you read in the book, settlements took place for over 100,000 cases, and uh, um, in the settlements, you can actually settle and pay billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars and still admit no guilt. So
Yeah.
I'm thinking, okay, guys, call me stupid, but if I'm paying 10, 11 billion dollars, I don't know if I can be innocent. I don't know, maybe I'm missing something. But if I'm like not guilty, I'm not paying 10 to 11, I'm 10 to 11 billion dollars and more, by the way. But by doing this, you admit no guilt, and the legal system allows this. And also, you still can sell the product. You can still go to Lowe's and Home Depot and buy Roundup. So I am hoping that we are going to live to a future where Roundup is no longer used, and there's different ways to actually kill weeds in the gardens, and hopefully the food becomes healthier, because I do believe that we have certain illnesses from the way we actually process food here, which is very different than Europe, by the way. So sorry for the long-winded answer. It's just very hard to summarize everything I went through, but I think these are some highlights.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because again, like even one of these questions can be its own
I know.
episode with you to talk back and forth with you. But I want to park here to talk about the justice aspect as it pertains to genetics and genomics. I grew up in a time where the people in my neighborhood, and I grew up in a small town of Denison, Texas, but the people in my neighborhood didn't trust doctors. They did not go to the doctor unless they had to. The open conversation was, oh, don't go to that medical center, right? People go in and they don't come out. So that was when I was a kid, just the open distrust of doctors in the healthcare system. But here's the thing. I'm much older now. And even though I talk to, and I'm of a certain age where my friends, my colleagues are developing cancers, and we're talking, Black men specifically, let's say for prostate cancer, and I would talk to them about genetic testing, and still, Shadi, they're like, I don't know about that genetic testing stuff, right? Because let's be open about it, right? The Tuskegee experiment is still relevant in certain communities and cultures where it's 40 years of injecting, Black men with syphilis and watching the effects. Henrietta Lacks, we have HeLa cells to celebrate for birthing this industry and these capabilities that we have, and these are the cases that we actually know about. Okay, I want to ask you, because this is the flag that I'm waving, right? The drugs of tomorrow, I believe, are going to be optimized to the genetics of those who participate in the clinical trials. And if, as a demographic of people who have distrust, don't participate in those clinical trials, don't allow themselves or amend themselves to gene sequencing to know about their genetic, you know, footprint or fingerprints, and how this could help or increase risk of disease, the disparities that we are seeing could possibly get wider. Can you speak to how genetics, on one hand, has brought justice in the healthcare system, if there's examples, and looking forward, how genetics can create, equity in the future of healthcare?
All important questions, but I do want to go back a bit to the question that you mentioned about trust before we go into the equity and how genetics do that. So my philosophy on this, if there's a certain demographic of people that don't have a lot of trust into the system, I do not blame the people. I blame the system. It is the system's job to earn the trust of people. It is absolutely the system's job and the hospital's job to earn the trust of the people. It is almost like, and I talk this in my cancer journey book about in the communication chapter. When I was young and a bit naive, if I'm dealing with a situation, I'm just starting my career, and let's say I'm talking to you as my patient and all of this, and I know you're not understanding what I'm saying or whatever it is, and I used to blame you. Well, I've told you everything I can. If you're not understanding, it's your fault. Well, in hindsight, no, it's not. You're the patient, you're the one who is seeking help, and you're the one who has a vulnerable condition. It is my job to earn your trust. It is my job to spend more time with you to communicate. It is my job to make sure I spell out things to you that you can understand so you can trust me. You don't buy trust, you don't demand trust, you earn trust. So I'm very sympathetic to any demographics or any population that may have skepticism about the healthcare system. And there are situations that we failed many people. So some of these concerns are justified. Some of them are not. Not every concern is justified. But regardless, justified or not, people want to get help and people genuine when they have issues. So if they're hesitant, the solution is to figure out how can I really take that hesitancy by sitting down, explaining, and showing the science. I strongly feel this is really important. So I'm very sympathetic to any skeptic. Um, as far as the genetics specifically, I think there are several issues that people are worried about. You probably heard, for example, recently about the 23andMe. The
Yes.
23andMe declared bankruptcy, and there's a whole lot of articles out there about the data of like 14 million people, and everybody is worried. That doesn't really make you feel trustworthy whenever you really see something like this. Like if you're like an average reader and you're seeing all of this, like, oh my God, what's going to happen? So people are worried about what are you going to do with my information?
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the medical establishment has not been as transparent as it can to explain what happens because there's no two-way thing. So for just to throw an example to you, so if a patient comes in and they undergo sequencing as part of a research study, right, undergo genomic sequencing, so you know all the information about the tumor, DNA, RNA, and they're in a clinical trial, how often do you think that we go back and tell the patient these were the results of the trial that you participated in? This is what we actually did with the genomic information. We actually were able to take that, process that with like 100 other patients. And guess what? We were able to actually find this and we published this. And thank you for doing this. Patients don't even get in this information. There's no like loop feedback. So you don't really get that reassurance. All what you know is somebody did this, and then the medical establishment gets the fame and the glory of really doing this. And they put sometimes thank you slide for patients. But patients need to know. We have to bring back that's how you establish trust. You tell people what you're doing with the information. That's actually key. So we have to earn the trust of everyone. As far as the equity with genetics, I think that the so there are certain, whenever you sequence tumors, you start realizing that there are certain mutations or certain things in the DNA or the RNA of cancers that may, for example, be more prevalent, let's say, in Black men with myeloma or prostate cancer. Others could be more in Hispanic individuals, other in Caucasian, and so on. So, trying to explain that this is just part of the heritage and the ethnicity and the race thing, and we're trying to understand what it is. So, by undergoing the sequencing, by undergoing genomic analysis, we really are all on the same level. We're really not really making the decision here based on ethnicity, race, or social demographics. We're making the decision based on the actual cancer. It just so happens, like you just mentioned earlier, there are certain cancers are more prevalent in particular demographics. So prostate cancer is one of them, myeloma is one of them. They just happen to be more prevalent, and we just don't know why. But explaining the fact that by undergoing the analysis of the cancer, it puts you all on equal footing, because then the decisions being made are based on the tumor characteristics. They're not based on other things. But also highlighting the fact that some of these things that we see may be related to the background of the individual, and additional research is needed. I don't know if I answered the question, but these are the initial thoughts I have.
Well, you certainly did, and the reality is, when we're learning more about it from a genetic standpoint, what we've seen is patients are getting better responses, and in some cases, we're able to detect cancer earlier, which means there are a lot of more survivors or people living with their cancer. At present day, we are approaching 2 million new cancer cases a year, which puts a burden on physicians like yourself, because I mean, how many more oncologists are coming through training? There are upwards of 18 million cancer survivors, or people with a
Totally.
history of cancer. Um, you have dedicated time to the industry. You treat patients, but you've also dedicated time to industry to increase how we expand patient access to this
Right.
innovation. And I spoke to Dr. Carlo Bafoco, who I'm sure you know, and I'll quote him because he says, 5 or 10 years from now, because of AI, we're going to see patients like we've never seen them before. They're going to come in informed, empowered. And this is essentially what we want to do through these conversations on our podcast. You are chief medical officer and head of strategy at Right, which is an AI platform. Talk to us a little bit about what you do, what your company does, and how this can accelerate this access to precision medicine and genetic information.
Yeah, thanks very much, Rome. So the nothing, by the way, as somebody who's taking care of hundreds, if not thousands of patients, nothing ever replaces the one-on-one interaction with a patient in the exam room. The thank you note that you get from a patient, the hug and the embrace that somebody gives you because you did something really that they really, it's just very different. But the ability to help people is somewhat limited on a one-on-one interaction in the confines of a hospital or an institution. Stepping out of that and going into an industry that allows you to reach tens of thousands of people, the impact could be much, much larger, much, much bigger.
Mhm.
It's just not as personal as you would want it to be. And I really felt I wanted to do that. I felt that maybe there's an opportunity to help more people um, outside of one hospital system at a time. Artificial intelligence, or AI, is something that we hear about every single day. Even, by the way, if you try not to hear about it, you're going to hear about it. Like if you switch the TV and the radio and everything,
Right.
somebody's going to tell you about AI.
Yeah.
So it's going nowhere. It is here to stay. What AI is basically, it's basically a way of trying to make the machines that we utilize smarter to help leverage what we're trying to accomplish. One of the things that we do to transform cancer care is clinical trials. Clinical trials, these are studies that are being done for innovative treatments before they become approved by the FDA and they come to market. Pretty much almost any drug that we have used in cancer at some point was a drug in a clinical trial. So we believe that by being able to accelerate the way we conduct clinical trials, we can make things much faster and more efficient. Why is this important? Because it takes sometimes about 20 years, 20 years from a drug to make it to market and for people to be able to prescribe it from the time we just think about it as a drug that could have an impact on cancer care. So if these 20 years become 15, are we going to save lives or not, especially if the drug is innovative? The answer is yes. I have to tell you, and stories, timing is everything.
Mhm.
This is for your audience and listeners. Every single time that I hear about a drug that is approved by the FDA, number one, I celebrate the success. I celebrate the fact that this actually is wonderful news and it's going to help patients. But then I pause and I reflect on the number of patients that I have lost
Mhm.
because they did not have access to this drug because it was approved now. If this drug was approved 3 years ago,
Yeah.
maybe some of my patients, families, relatives could have been alive if they qualified for this drug. So shortening that time is key because it's not going to have an impact on life and it's going to save lives. The way we do that is with artificial intelligence. So at Right, and thanks for the plug. Right is a small company, and what we're trying to do is we bring artificial intelligence, generative AI, and we apply the software and the technology on the processes and the operational aspects of how we conduct and execute on clinical trials. The goal is to make that cycle of clinical trials shorter. If it takes fewer years to finish a clinical trial, and if we bring a drug to market and help the companies that are manufacturing these drugs to bring the drug to market faster, then we believe we can have a positive impact on patients' lives. That's what we're trying to accomplish, and we do work with many companies that are, looking at genetics as well and sequencing, like you mentioned. Every single company that is trying to make a drug, they actually usually have the target approach and what is the molecular aspect of that drug and the disease that they're trying to accomplish as part of what they are trying to do. So, that's what we're trying to do. We're 2+ years old, and I hope the next time I'm on the show, I'll have a lot of positive information to share with you about what we've done.
Awesome. I'll get you out of here on this. You talked about this earlier in our conversation, and there's actually a chapter in your book, The Cancer Journey, dedicated to communication, the critical importance of communication as a provider and a patient. And you mentioned that too often patients can feel overwhelmed, right,
Yep.
by the medical jargon. Um, I've been there as a loved one supporting someone that they may be able to seize on to maybe a couple of things in a consult, right? So it's helpful to have someone there. And no matter what ailment they're facing, it can be difficult to know the right questions to even ask your doctor, right? How can we equip patients and their loved one? And I guess this is the context of cancer care to communicate more effectively with their physicians, specifically, around this challenge as precision medicine grows. What are three practical ways or takeaways from someone watching this that you can give them to help them advocate, start conversations with their doctor around a precision medicine approach for their care?
I think it's like we just said, AI is everywhere. I think precision medicine everywhere. It is, you hear about target therapy, you hear about all of these types, the immunotherapy and so on. Um, I would say the practical tips. Number one is open a line of communication with your healthcare team, and please trust me on this. No question is stupid. It is so important to know that. It's just okay to ask questions. And I strongly believe if you're in the exam room, if you're talking to your healthcare team and you feel that your questions are not being answered, you feel you're being dismissed, you feel that people are making you feel these questions are not welcome and they're stupid, please go see somebody else. And the reason I say that, by the way, is because the journey of cancer is not going to be always smooth. You're going to have some tough time, you're going to have some great times, and you're going to hopefully emerge winner on the other side. But to get that, you're going to have some obstacles. And if you're not even getting your answers questions to start with, how are you going to get your questions answered later on when you have some issues? That's really important. So, open line of communication, understand no question is stupid. Feel free to ask questions. And the three questions I would say you should ask is number one, why did I get this cancer? Because asking the why is important. Now, the question could be we don't know, unfortunately, and frankly, probably that's going to be the most common answer. But there will be some situations where this is not the common answer, such as, well, it's an inherited situation from parents or gene in the
Mm.
family, or let me sequence your tumor and check the molecular analysis of this disease and try to understand if there's a particular mutation that drove the development of this cancer or things of that nature. So asking the why is fair. It's probably the most common question you get asked as an oncologist. And the first chapter in my book is what is cancer and what causes it. That is usually a lot. That's the common question. Number two, I think it's an important question to ask if nobody has checked your the genomics of your cancer. Ask the question: is it okay to sequence my tumor? Can we send my tumor for genomic analysis? Do we know if I have a mutation or not? Basically, you're just asking if it's you want to know the particular dynamics of the particular of the cancer that you have, and it's okay question to ask. And then the third question, from a practical perspective, are there any targeted therapies that we can use for my cancer? Any pills or things that can target the particular cancer versus the traditional chemotherapy that we normally use, where it doesn't really target a particular area in the tumor, it just targets everything. So these are the three practical questions to ask, and I do think they're important. And I think it tells you it hopefully leads to better answer and more open conversations. But ultimately, you need to feel empowered to ask these questions. I think patients inherently they're overwhelmed, but they're also afraid of bothering you as a doctor. Well, that's your job. Otherwise, you shouldn't be in the profession of medicine. If you're going to be bothered by questions, you should find something else to do. That's one. And number two is they're afraid that the questions are silly or stupid. They don't want to sound like that. And there's no such a thing. There's no such a thing. I mean, how many times have we been consumers, me and you, in any type of establishment? It could be renting a car, buying a car, it could be whatever. You're buying a computer, you're going to Home Depot to buy something. You should see the type of questions I ask when I go to Home Depot. I mean, I
Yeah.
think they literally know right now that I cannot even change a bulb in my house, but that's okay. I just
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah.
And so that's only changing a bulb. This is your health. Everybody who's listening to this, and thank you for doing this show. This is the type of show everybody should listen to. Should feel empowered to ask any questions. But these are the three ones I can think of.
I certainly appreciate it. You put your finger right on the pulse of what we try to accomplish through this medium, because we want patients and their loved ones to have the language and the confidence just to ask the conversation, because I have had conversations with cancer patients through this medium, and they have admitted, like, they are just mindful of the doctor. Oh, he's got all these other patients, and
Right.
there's only got 15 minutes, and yeah, I don't know if I can ask this question. And those are real concerns of patients. So I really, really, really appreciate
But I have a
you saying that.
practical, if I have a practical solution to this, because it is true sometimes. So if you have 15-20 minute visit and you come in with 40 questions,
Yeah,
it's just not going to happen. So I actually have a practical advice in the book. And usually if I see that list and you're coming for a follow-up and so on, I respectfully tell the patient, okay, I have a very busy clinic. I can't answer all your 40 questions. Give me your top five. Let's answer them right now. And I will call you at the end of the day and we'll go over the rest. What that means, what that tells me, the patient then picks the five that are really bothering them.
yes,
So we get rid of that, we answer those, and we move on. The patient understands that because they know that they could be the one waiting. They're very nice about it and they really respect that. At the end of the day, before I go home, or maybe I'm driving home, I'll pick up the phone and we'll go over these questions. But there's probably some questions that you know they can wait and some that they can't wait. It allows the patient to, this is the kind of relationship that should happen. And that's okay if the doctor says that, and the patient should not be offended. Patients are offended when they are dismissed completely, or when you're not really transparent with them in telling them that you really have to move on because you also have other patients waiting. And that's my advice.
fantastic advice. Thank you so much, Dr. Chadi Nabhan, hematology oncologist, author. Let folks know where that they can go get your books and connect with you through your podcast.
They can reach out anytime. My podcast airs weekly every Tuesday called Healthcare Unfiltered. It's available like yours on Spotify, Amazon, Apple, SoundCloud, on YouTube as well. And then the books are available anywhere you consume books. Could be on Amazon, could be Barnes and Noble. Um, just you can just go to Amazon, put in the search bar one of them, or Barnes and Noble, or anywhere, and there's also information on that on my website, shadinabhan.com.
You got a tremendous heart for patients and their families. And by the way, how in the heck did you become a Patriots fan?
Well, when when I first immigrated from Syria, I ended up in Boston.
Okay, all right.
Yeah, I was supposed to go to California to study English more, but then Boston was closer because it was on the East Coast, was
Yeah.
closer to Europe and everywhere. So I ended up in Boston, and I had no idea what American football was because I watched soccer all my life, and then I enjoyed it, and now I'm both, soccer and football. That's how it happened.
Well, you could have been worse. You could have landed in Texas and be a suffering Cowboy fan like me. So,
You guys had your heyday. You had your heyday.
yeah, apparently it'll never come again. So,
Yeah. Well, same
thank
happened
you.
for Patriots. Probably need another 20 years.
You guys are spoiled. Tom Brady's and Bill Belichick spoiled you guys. Dr. Chadi Nabhan, thank you for being a guest on Genetics for Healthcare.
Thank you so much for doing what you're doing.